My name's Art, and this is Joe, and we'll kind of fill time for a second or two while we make sure we've got everybody here. I guess you all thought that you were going to come to a workshop about price, right? But this workshop is about power. So we'll talk about price, but it really is about power. So it's a P word, so we're good there. But I think you'll find it pretty interesting because of that, because a big part of pricing is where the power lies. And depending on how big the group is, I'd like to do a quick intro of everybody just so we know what your interest is to make hopefully the presentation a little more meaningful. I'm Art and this is Joe. We'll show our bios in a second. Excuse me for my voice, allergy season. Anybody's got it? So when we talk about power, when we talk about price, the point is that you have the power over certain things that you can control and change. Lots of decisions in your business. You can't change the direction of the wind, however. So there's a real world out there that you have to adapt to because it may or may not adapt to you. So the rules are out there, and I spent 40 years in business. Joe's been 40 years in business, and we weren't able to change any of the basic ground rules. We adapted to them. We learned tools on how to manage them to be able to sail into the wind. And you need to think of your business like sailing into the wind. There's always wind that's going to be in your face at some point in time. You're going to turn a corner and all of a sudden it's, oops, I'm in the wind. And the key is not to let that sail catch the wind and put you in a drink, okay? And that happens a little too often. So that's the analogy we're going to start with here. And really, power is about taking control. My goal is to give you some tools and awareness where you can start to take control. To be honest, Joe and I are part of Score. We do mentoring, the hub does mentoring. You really, when you get to this part of it, which is kind of down your planning process, you really want to touch base with somebody with some experience, preferably in your field, but in the general area of business to give you some of these, help you exercise the tools. So we're just going to hit the tip of the iceberg today, obviously. And it looks like they didn't give you any handouts, is that right? I don't have enough, but I have some. Is there anybody who is not going to want to do some work on your company on price? Because then you need this. But this is just what we're going to do is we're going to go through the concepts, and then we're going to try and apply it in your particular instances. So we'll see how far we get here. I will, if you give me a card. If maybe two of you can share, if you want to pass those down, please. Here's.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. I think you're close enough there to do that. So what we'll do is as we go through this, I'll point out some of the points on the sheet, but then the last slide we'll walk through this a little bit and have a back and forth dialogue. Yeah. Yep. So basically we're going to be three parts today. The first one is going to talk about planning and the factors you ought to consider in planning and prioritizing those factors. Actions and decisions you can take to take control, and then pricing models and dynamics. So we're going to kind of start with a little bit of theory and concept, go to some practical tools, and then get into actual pricing. Get up here. Okay, good. All right. I don't know. The group's a little bit big. I'm going to throw out one rhetorical question, and then we'll jump into the slides. That question is, who sets your price? If you're in business today, Tell me who sets your price. If you're going to get in business, tell me who you think's going to set your price. Anybody who's outgoing and sociable, feel free to answer.
For me, it's me and market.
You and marketing?
Me and the
Okay.
market.
Oh, the market.
Me and the market.
Okay.
It's a balance between what I need to survive, what's a win-win for my client, and what the market kind of not going too far or
Right.
too low with the market.
Exactly. So there's internal and external. And it's kind of a balance of those two. You have needs, your customers have needs and wants. And how do we get, and I've been in sales and marketing. Joe's been in it his whole career. I've been in it for about 10 years. And it's, the win-win is where you want to go. There's a lot of customers out there. You just need to find the ones that match up with you. Anybody else have a thought on how you set price? Did you just do it? Did you let your competitors do it? Some people price to the competition.
Could be based on your ingredients. It's like for me, I make cheesecakes, so my ingredients and my labor that I'm putting into the product, possibly my overhead, because I work out of a kitchen, so I have to pay for that.
So ideally, you set the minimum price at your cost. Otherwise, you'd go out of business.
Right.
So in that case, cost is a driver for your particular business with the cost structure you have. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, why don't we just real quick, just say your name and what your business is on a tweet basis. Start in the back.
My name is Brandon. I'm very early on in the process, but what my idea for the company is a combination of personal development, interpersonal connection focused on biological.
Okay, so you're in concept services.
I'm Roland Alvarez. We're partners here in our enhancing reading.
Great.
Enhancing reading for,
So a social enterprise or type of an activity.
I'm Ann, and the popcorn version is doing virtual sewing lessons.
Oh, cool.
My name's Chris. I have a patent for a wet wipe dispenser. It's called Wet Wipe Wizard. It's,
Okay.
it's,
So you're in the concept stage?
no, we have a prototype, and we're now doing cost analysis for actual production.
Okay. Cool.
My name's Jenny Hempstead. I work for a company called Wright Brothers Institute. We're a 501c3 that supports innovation and collaboration for the Air Force.
I'm Ava Pecoraro. I'm a life and leadership coach for individuals and organizations. I'm Abby, and I make spiritual tools of multi-faith beliefs.
Super.
I'm
Andrew?
and I'm developing something in the CPG space.
My name is Damon Curry, and I do electronic product design. We're launching a consumer product.
I think we got one back there. Consumer products? In business now?
Yes.
Okay.
Been in business for 6 years.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Vivian. I own a business called the Cheesecake Lab, and I specialize in gourmet cheesecakes and also custom flavor combination cheesecakes, as well as a cheesecake topped cookie.
Sweet. Sorry about the pun.
Literally, right. My name is Shatan Deneen. My business is Grant Source, which is grant and proposal writing, business coaching and training facilitation. Been in business for 15 years and raised almost 18 million.
Good. Good. I want to talk to you. I have clients.
My name's Val. I run a company called Sugar Camp. I create bandanas and accessories with and Crucible and feminist spin on them.
Okay. Super.
I'm Shaylin Green. I'm starting a boutique with unique apparel pieces for women.
Okay. You are?
I'm Luther Palmer. A company's name is Urban Mathaholics. We sell math storybooks that use augmented reality apps to bring the math to life.
Cool. You with him?
No.
Oh, what are you doing here?
So my name is Sean McKinney. I own a company, Silica Dreams LLC. Started out as a Finnish carpenter. Ended up getting into glass and now doing fusing and design.
Cool.
We operate out of the Lyndon Davis building, utilize repair of stained glass window.
Oh, okay,
Using,
super. So you're in business today,
yeah,
in services, basically, I mean, product services. And you are?
My name is Kent Kaiser. I have a gallery at Front Street and also starting an artist collective.
Super. Okay, good. Well, we've got a real mix here. I don't know how we're going to cover all your needs, but we'll try. I'm not going to read off this, but I've been in and out of business and around it, and I love it. And I've been with Score for 12 years, helping entrepreneurs with their businesses, but most lately mainly nonprofits. A lot of need there, especially since COVID. And then Joe, whoops. I don't have, oh, there's Joe. Joe's been in sales. You were with what, Kodak?
Kodak, DuPont
From-
at one point, a couple of
yeah.
others.
So he's been
International
in
paper.
a lot of big companies, a lot of sales type situations, marketing. So we generally have an idea what we're talking about, but correct us if we're wrong. So pricing, we talked a little bit about how pricing gets set, but it's really a bunch of different variables, and we're going to talk a little bit about identifying the key variables, because you really can't keep an eye on all of these things. And usually there's one or two or maybe three that drive your place in the marketplace, which in turn will drive your pricing. So we've got to figure out where the drivers are. For instance, in the baking business, materials and time is a lot of your costs, and there's almost no way that you can compress those other than maybe through scale or whatnot. So, you know, yeah, that's a good idea. And Joe's going to answer the questions I can't, because he's a really smart guy in the room. But anyhow, there's some of them are internal, some of them are external. They're all dynamic. And the point is, and the emphasis that I want to talk to you about today is pricing and understanding your business at such a level that you know what the drivers to pricing are. And as things change, i.e. COVID, for instance, what impact is that likely to have? And you need to know those critical moving pieces, kind of the stack that leads to your pricing foundation in order to do that. One way I like, this is called a business model canvas. If you Google it, you'll find lots of different, now there's a gentleman, thank you.
Okay.
That was very nice. And a good-looking girl doesn't hurt. Just saying, I observe my environment. Key to a marketer.
all that situational awareness.
Yeah.
I feel uncomfortable.
I apologize to you. I compliment him. You didn't get up. You're just jealous. I know what's really going on here. Okay, anyhow, what I like about the map is it deals with the customers, your offer, what you have to do to satisfy your customers, and then brings it all down to the bottom line, which is, okay, what's it cost you to deliver on what you promise? And then what can you charge? Price is down in here. But you'll notice it's kind of after you do a lot of other things. And a lot of people rush to price real quick. The nice thing about this model is it is time dependent and dynamic. What we're doing here is we're making assumptions of my segments. Somebody give me a business, customer segment in your business.
Nonprofits.
Okay, what's the segment? Nonprofits is a big
Nonprofits
universe.
that are $1 million in budget size,
Why?
because they have the money to pay me.
Okay, that's a very defined segment. That's it. That's really what you do. When this says specific, that's what it means. Is how, you know, what is, and one thing you can look at here, and I'm sure you do this too, is those are also clients that will be repeat customers like that. So, you know, not only will they pay you, their lifetime value will be substantial, because selling that customer is one of the most expensive things you'll do in your business. And if you have to keep getting a new customer every time you get a new dollar of revenue, you probably aren't going to be able to survive. You want those repeat customers. You want to do a good job for them. You want to meet their value proposition at a price that they can live with. Anybody else have a segment, a client piece that you've defined? You got one, I know. We talked about it. So tell us that. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm a life coach, but I'm looking at college athletic departments and servicing, life coach for student athletes. I'm a previous student athlete at UD, and now I've lived my whole life, and I'm like, dang, I wish I would have had known some of this stuff earlier. So that's kind of a new focus for me.
And that's why I do what I do. I wish somebody was there for me when I was in your seats. So, so that's a personal passion too. So that's even better. We like that. So, but that's very specific. I mean, we can home in on that, and then she can get to, okay, is it women or men or both? Are there certain sports? You're from basketball? Is it, you can dial it down as long as the volume is big enough to make you enough profit that you can thrive on. But so you get to the value, we get to the segments, and that's the most important thing. Once I've got that, now we can start thinking about, okay, what's unique about athletes versus the rest of us that, a student athlete in particular at a certain age. And we were talking about it. She's not a plant. We actually had a little mentoring session. But she's been there. She knows the feeling in her gut. So she really understands. And that's what you want to understand about your customers. And lots of times I have found that if you're really good, because you have perspective, you may see a value that they don't realize they have. But it may be the key that differentiates you from everybody else. Because if you're not differentiated or better with a competitive advantage, you got nothing. Then you're a commodity, then you go low price, and you're going to let your competitor set your price. And the last person you want setting your price is your competitor. But a lot of businesses do that. Somebody says, well, Joe Schmo, he'll write me a grant for 10% less than you. What are you going to do? Your customer just sets your price based on his cost structure, his key resources, his everything, his willingness to take risk and maybe go out of business. Do you want to go there? You want to follow that? Low price competition is not for the small business generally, unless you are cheaper because you don't have the overhead of a bigger company. So you got to identify that when we're into key activities and resources as to, are my costs potentially going to be lower?
Yeah, if you're the low-cost producer, low-cost house, yeah, you can afford to do that, right? You may not want to be.
Yeah, but the problem is you may end up working for minimum wage too, because people underprice their value when they do that. So, and then are there partners? Is there a way you can reach outside your organization and leverage somebody that does have scale, perhaps? Like when you're buying things, you're not going to grind your own flour or grow your own wheat. So, you've got some key partners, which are your suppliers, which in today's world and in COVID world got to be real critical. I think we got a real wake-up call and are still getting it today that, I'm buying 3 times the volume of chemicals that I used to buy because that's all the supplier will let me buy for a minimum. So I can pay 50% more, but not going to happen. And down in here again with the customer piece, what is your relationship? And even on products, I mean, for services, a lot of people realize that the customer has to trust you. And I subscribe to what some people say is that 80% of customers have their mind made up before they talk to you or they talk price to you. They either want to do business with you or they want to do business with somebody else. If they want to do business with you, the challenge is to find out, okay, where's that fit? So price is almost an excuse. And I mean, I still buy used cars. And I just love the game. I like negotiating with salesmen, and I like to know that they have to sell that car to make any money. I have millions of cars I could pick from if I really want to, especially in today's world, right? So the reason they play all the games they play is the cards are stacked against them, and they're trying to get in your head enough that you don't know that. So, I think this relationship, and we'll talk a little bit about where you are in the supply chain. Do you have a direct relationship with your customers, or is it through someone else? And that can be, you got to really trust that someone else and have confidence that they're going to hold up the integrity of your product. You have anything about that, Joe? You're the customer guy.
Well, I think I work with a lot of a distribution channel questions, direct dealers, distributors, value-added resellers, all these concepts. I don't know if they're familiar with yeah, you got to choose wisely and choose well. And by the way, they could be your customer too. If you're working with a distributor dealer organization, remember they're just as much in a way, different way a customer as an buyer. Everybody along the value chain, supply chain is in a way a customer of somebody else.
Yeah, downstream.
And even as you were saying, you're talking about suppliers and relationship. Imagine the COVID situation between two companies. A is buying from B, but A doesn't treat B very well, right? So B gets tight on supplies. Who's B going to take care of? Or let's just say, who's B not going to take care of? So that's the point. We're all customers kind of dodging our way through this complicated maze, and a lot of it's logical, but a lot of it is, you just might say, emotional relationships. Constant negotiation on every front to arrive at the price point. And of course, yes, you have to be in the head of your market or your customer if you want to be. If you really want to do the optimal pricing job, you've got to spend time, you got to think about it, and don't jump to the easy answer, because it does change.
Yeah, negotiation is actually a good thing. A lot of people want to avoid it, and that's why I say I make it a game. To me, it's fun, and if you think of it as trying to get to the win-win, and that you're really a team, and if the other person isn't there and isn't willing to compromise to that, then they're probably not a good customer of yours. You want to build trust between you and the customer, because there are times where you're going to have to ask him for more than he really wants to give, but that relationship, and we all have experienced it, I paid more, I know I paid more than I could have in order to help the person, and that builds that bond. So there's give and take too.
Sure. Question on you got aspect of, you have a product, it's worth a price, you have a competitor, they have a price.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if there's not been a need created for it, or the price has been established, it makes 400% more, let's say you're turning $1.75 and $15.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that aspect of, because you don't have a competitor that's making anything that's comparable. There's nothing else that compares to a market that creates that product revenue, but only 1% of the market is buying. Where is that kind of aspect to create a price? Because you've had somebody purchase something that took 37 cents to make for $15.
Mm-hmm.
How do you expand that to more people for that need?
That's price elasticity, and that's the punchline of the presentation today. It's what it is there's a curve, price demand, and you also need to go out and see if there's not crossover customers. You might have something you're selling to commercial places, but there's a select segment of the residential market that you could sell your glass products to, say. Or there's a specialty, or I sell to China. I've got a company with 3 people in it, and 2 of us work part-time, but we've got a patent on the product, and we've licensed it to a Chinese company. And the technology is good, but not unique in the United States. But nobody in the United States is willing to share that technology in China because they're afraid they're going to get ripped off. And we've had this partner for 15 years, so we trust them. The technical director is sitting in my office in Cincinnati, so they don't really know, the details of the formula. So we sell over there, I make 10 times as much in China as I make here, because they don't have a product, and then, you know, we've got a price point over there that works for us.
Remember, your four basic, you might say dimensions, components you're considering basic marketing. They talk about product, price, promotion, place. All of those things you're filling together. It's really the other three you might, I guess your point is the other three that affect price.
Yeah.
You know, you may be more convenient.
But we'll chat afterwards. You definitely have a specific situation if that's the case.
Get down to a particular place, you almost have to, you can't, you can't ask the question generally. You have to get it, you have to ask specifically, in a way about your business to come to it.
Oh, yeah, and that only applies to like one isolated thing that, as I said, for 1%, that has been 2 square feet to create, if everybody bought one, $8,000 out of, I don't know how much. Now, is that repeatable? Is that innovatable? Is that movable?
Yeah, let's talk about that later.
We'll talk about that offline.
So this is the planning piece, though, and you can do it this way, or you can just make a list of these things and start working across it this way. But Google it, and you'll come up with something. If you've got more questions, if you go to score.org, there's videos on it. But the key is to get those drivers to your business that are most important, and you should have something in all of them. And then you prioritize those. And when we're really looking at price within that model, obviously the customers, the competitors, and the costs are what bring you to price. We talked about costs in one situation, but that's always the case. Not in that situation. In that one, it's not these two, it's going to be this.
That's the end,
So that's where you focus, and you've got to see how you can find customers that are interested in that, or different applications or things. Does that make sense to people? I mean, this is it. If you take one thing away from today, that's really how price gets set. And and like I said, don't let your competitors set it. Don't go below your costs. Work a lot up with your customers and your value proposition, as we've talked about.
Always discount for a reason.
Right.
Temporarily.
And we'll talk about different pricing models.
Don't, that's different than saying, oh, my price is, half of the price. You can always, for some reason, temporarily discount from the, you might say your ideal price, or at least your manufacturer suggested retail price, that kind of thing. You can discount.
Yeah, like a free sample or a freemium. We talked about doing some free coaching, just to give somebody a flavor for your style and everything. I always give somebody a half an hour of coaching when I was charging for it, because if we don't fit, I don't want to. I don't want to waste my time any more than that. But it's worth a half an hour to test the market. So when we define customers, you want to look at market size again. Is this a supplement to your income? Is it something where you've got kids and they're going to go to college and you're the prime earner? Whatnot, that'll define how big your revenue needs to be. Then you have to look at your market share of that total market, what kind of growth you have. I talked a little bit about lifetime value. This is huge on pricing.
Yeah, is it one and done? They're going to buy one from you and go,
right.
Or you got ongoing business. Think of all the deals you get, online, direct marketing or whatever, that gives you the first.
It's a little bit like.
Reduction on the magazines. You get the first 6 months free or something virtually.
Yeah.
They've got a model that says they can lock in enough people.
Because people don't cancel enough.
Yeah, and make it up.
And then the other thing you can look at, particularly in a unique product, is maybe complementary services. Is there something you can do in the design side of things so that not only is this glass something that says, oh, I've got the exact spot for it, but you establish the spot. These things are best on the east side of a building, or whatever the aesthetics of it are. So lots of times you can enhance the value by bringing a little bit of expertise. Good news is that in your case, for instance, that might be universal, that it applies to almost every building you might put glass in, or whatever the application might be. So bring knowledge to.
We've had that south-facing windows. If they are red, they're $200
Mhm.
thermostat. We're now sealing the window, storming it,
Yeah.
and ventilating it.
That's a perfect example of,
Most people don't bat an eye if that was a part of their bid for
Yeah.
the church.
mhm.
Because they're like, oh, wait, what?
So these,
It's a thermostat.
so you do a lot of churches, is that your
We've done
market?
churches, windows, but I mean, from a little kid coming to the studio and making a piece of glass for
Yeah.
his dad to,
Cool.
I make my stuff.
Nice, nice.
You got
Okay, then we've got customer, we talked about that there, and that's needs and wants, some are required. And there's buyer behavior, and there's preferences, again, repeat buyers, loyalty, one-time buys, and preferences. Competitive intelligence is the competitor side, you really need to understand them.
You're really cooking a recipe. You're
Yeah.
doing a gourmet recipe that fits what you have, what you think your market wants. You're kind of cooking it up. And by the way, tomorrow the customer preferences change. You've got to, I don't know, add something else. That's the fun of it. You're gaming it the whole time.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know. That's what I.
That's the other
I always
takeaway.
found it interesting to figure it out.
Yeah, the other takeaway is that it is a dynamic world.
Yeah.
And jump into those opportunities. Stock market goes down today, I'm looking to see what might be
Yeah, you can't
an
engineer
opportunity
it.
out there.
You can't engineer it, and you can't do it purely on, let's say,
Yeah.
accounting, finance, adding, subtracting, here's the profit, I mean, because, again, it's competitive, somebody was talking about competitive situation.
Right.
I watched a company in a driver's seat with the federal government on a major contract, $100 million, and some accountant got in there and fooled it, by a few cents,
Yeah.
per unit. I mean, they own that segment of the business. They lost one of the big contracts.
Yep.
For the decade.
Yeah, it's serious business.
It's tricky, yeah.
That's why it's important to have your foundation established and know your customer.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know their customers would be my argument in that situation. It could be
So I guess
catastrophic.
the point is, be really careful when you're playing the big one. It's one thing to chase one customer on or off.
I'll tell you a story from General Motors. Is I bid these multi-million-dollar contracts with them, and we had a set of contracts, and they went to bid it out. And I said, well, why do you want to bid it out? When everybody's satisfied. The plants didn't want them to bid it. Purchasing wanted to bid it. Purchasing said, well, we have to get a 10% reduction in cost. And the way the contracts worked is I changed their chemicals and cut their costs.
Management objective for the year, really.
Yeah, and that's not negotiable. And so I asked them, I said, well, if I gave you a 10% guaranteed reduction, why do you need to bid it? Because it's worked for you, it's worked for me. And I calculated out, and it was like 10 plants, and it was going to cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars to bid it if I could get the price, even at that 10%. But maybe somebody else is coming in even lower than that, and maybe I have to go to 15 or 20%. So they said, well, let's talk about it. And they came back and they said, well, if you can give us the 10%, that's our goal. I had figured that out. I knew the customer. We got the contract, no bid, no wear and tear, no lost efforts to sell it. And I got that money back. And I'll tell you, it was a big corporation, a big chemical company. And the CFO said, are you out of your mind? And I said, no. Here's what happens. Here's what it's going to cost me. Here's the risk I've got. And if I lose it, and I said, so if I lose it, I'm going to explain to the CEO that you told me to bid it.
You won that.
And then I won that, and then I won the argument because it.
Battle in a big organization, not maybe so much on your small
As
company.
long as I could save that money, which I knew I could.
Really?
If I didn't, then I was the loser. But you have to put skin in the game. That's the other thing. There's a little risk in some of this stuff. But I didn't get greedy. I said, you know what? I can, even if I don't save all that money, because the kicker on this was I was also making a bunch of money selling chemicals to them. And that was kind of behind the screen. So I knew, and that was the issue. If I lost it, the competitor would probably pick up those chemicals too. And when I laid that out to the CFO, it truly got to be a non-brainer. Now, the problem is that I have a master's degree in aeronautical engineering from a major Ivy League school. So these numbers and this logic all works for me. Does this logic work for all you guys? Or are you a little more fuzzy on So I have to remember that too. You as my customers. You need somebody in your organization, though, or a mentor, like a Score mentor, for instance, or a Launch Dayton mentor, who gets this stuff.
Well, the other thing on that,
Okay,
is that
just-
you had trust. Wait, you had trust in a relationship,
Yeah.
which led into playing, being able to play that card.
Right.
Again, if you come in cold, and I don't know you from anybody else.
That's that foundation of trust we talked
he's
about, right?
He's back to the bidding thing. There's nobody gonna buy it.
Yeah,
So,
and
relationship.
but the sneaky part of it,
Touchy-feely stuff.
the sneaky part of it was that the plants
Yeah.
wanted us and trusted us.
Yeah.
And when the purchasing went to them, I know what their answer was, because they knew me and they knew that I was good for it. So I was in that, before I was in the chemical business, I was in the hazardous waste business. And if I screwed up, my company screwed up, officers of my clients would potentially go to jail under hazardous waste laws. So I have always been right up front, straight up, and it's who I am. But that's the power of trust, and that's why I'm this way, because it was service businesses. I couldn't say, here's your product, it'll work. It was me and my company. So, but seriously, that thing about, I don't want to lose that point of find somebody, if you can't do this, if you're not getting all of this, that can, because it's that important. It is a make or break in you being profitable.
That growth potential.
Yes.
Yeah.
That too.
Think lifetime, even if yours is a one and done service.
Yeah.
What they're looking for is what is the lifetime value, and it may be that they're more interested in your management capability. Can you manage a subcontractor?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to.
Yeah, you're down to this complementary.
Services, whether you do it or someone that you can find.
Right.
Who doesn't have the capacity to deal with the buyer.
Right.
That's why it gets so tricky. There's so many,
Yeah.
say, decision factors and different ways
That-
to spend
yep.
it, et cetera. And
That's why you kind of need to
it's
map it out with the
like,
canvas.
Football, it's like a sport with tactics and strategy, but also psychology, and
Yep.
you got to be master of all, plus lucky. You got to be master of all those plus lucky.
So we mentioned that term of segmenting customers. So you want to really understand them as best you can, from age, gender, ethnicity. Are you going to be local? Are you a local company? I make more money in China than I make in the US with my chemical business. So, I wouldn't have thought that, but they haven't missed a beat with COVID.
Yeah.
We have, the guys in China at the chemical plant there were locked in for 45 days. They did not leave. Nobody came in or out of the plant for 45 days. So,
No more complaints.
yeah. And they probably made some overtime, but they were not happy. They were not happy. Are we dealing with individuals or businesses? So again, that specific customer definition, you really want to categorize, because Joe and I have different buying behavior than some of you young ladies do here. We're men, we're older, there's so many differences that the preferences are just not going to be the same. So don't kid yourself and say everybody wants my product. Well, everybody may want it, but I want it a certain way and you want it a different way, right? So that's the power of this, is now you can start dialing your product around. And when you go back to your canvas and you look at what you have to do your product, now you can start moving those pieces and say, well, if I make this change for art, I have to do this, and it's going to cost me that. So that's where all these pieces, it's like a clock. It really is, that they're working together.
Can the same product be priced or be different for each individual kind of customer?
Absolutely.
So like on that page, somebody in China, they're going to pay $3 more than somebody that's in Versailles, Ohio, because it's here.
Actually, in China, they're paying less because they're buying the chemicals and the labor is less in China. So they make it there. I just give them the secret. But
like
yes,
for
the short
somebody
answer is
here
yes,
specifically,
absolutely.
like, is it better to see growth of, I made 10% from you, I lost 5% from overall on the thing, we went up 12%.
A definite maybe. That's how I can tell you, it's a definite maybe. You know, you gotta work the numbers, you gotta look
Yeah.
at the situation, you're playing the game, you know, what's my next?
I never
step?
say lose money, but like on that GM one, I took a lower percentage, but I had to do the math and show that over the 3 year, it was a 3-year contract too. So it was added up, you take 3 years of chemical sales, it was tens of millions of dollars. The profit on that, we did not want to take a chance on. That's why. So I talked to the CFO as a customer in his language. And that's what you want to do. You want to be talking your customer's language.
So we might caution you further and say, the only easy answers here, you know, the only sure yeses, nos, and maybe, or for the easy situations. Most of the situations are pretty complicated.
But if you break the pieces out, they're
logical.
they're too complicated, even for a rocket scientist, if you don't get them filtered like this. And this is what I've learned over the years. Now, the other big issue is competitors. Everybody in here probably has competitors of some sort. But what you don't realize is that there's an environment, and again, we're back to the sailboat and the wind, competitive intensity, your suppliers. Right now, if you're dependent on natural gas or oil, whatever your prices were last year don't mean a thing, right? And if you're buying from Exxon and you are buying $10,000 worth of something from them, do they really care if you go away or not? So there's supplier power. You cannot do anything about that. Versus if you are dealing with somebody and you're half their business and you come to them and say, hey, if I buy 20% more, can I get a lower price? You can probably get something here. So the supplier may set your price. In the case of flour, if flour doubles because Ukraine doesn't have wheat, now you're going to see it come through to your costs, and your prices are going to have to go up, and you have no control over it. Then you've got competitors, obviously, and they can be out there mucking with the market and your customers. But then there's also buyer power. If I'm selling to Walmart and I need 10% price increase, what do you think the chances are? If I'm selling to Bob's Donut Shop, maybe I can do that. So that's where this comes in. So again, this may be something beyond your control that you can't help, but it's driving your price. He's going to set the price. In that case, your customer sets price. And then, are there new people in and out? Do you have barriers to entry, is what's called here, that people can't come in, or is there geographic limits or something? But if that's a very open pipe, now your competitive intensity is definitely going to be much higher. Ditto technology. Do you have a technology barrier? Our chemicals, we have a patent on it, so I've got intellectual property, and in China, I've safeguarded that with having the technical director here. I've got a customer who who we license to, and they don't want me to audit their books. They're paying me 10% on their sales, but they don't want to show me their sales. So I said, okay, well, you have to buy all the raw materials from me because I know 10% of the product has that chemical in it. So I manage that number, and then they pay me not based on what they sold it for, which was 10% that I got, but I get 20% 20% on what I sell to them. So there's different ways to put barriers in there and protect yourself. And especially if you're in supply chain with distributors, that gets to be pretty important. You want to watch your intellectual property, that they can't steal it or replicate it, and you want to have some way, if you're on a license agreement, to audit. And people do cook their books, sorry to say. So I know how much of this product they're buying, and it's an XG number, we call it. It's not in the chemical company's catalog. They don't tell these people what it is. They know the deal that we got with them. So, and I don't want to make you paranoid, but it's competitive environment, that is the nastiest part of the business. So the other thing that we get into with that distribution channel is where you fall in here. Are you servicing the final product and selling the final product, or you're somewhere up here? The further up here you are, then as Joe says, your customer probably is here. If this is General Motors making cars, and as a chemical supplier, I'm here. Do I care what their customers want? In that case, no. They don't care what chemical went into machining the equipment. If it was a radio, a Bose radio, yeah, the customer is going to want certain. So you've got to know where you are and how far up that it reaches as to who might be a stakeholder, I call them. Your customer might be here, but there may be stakeholders all the way up. And then again, you've got somebody back here that you have to keep track of and make sure that you've got a competitive cost and a reliable supply. Reliable supply for materials now is obviously a lot more important than it used to be. So if we talk about distribution, where you are there, if you've got a reseller, and that reseller may even be putting market discounts out there, if this is the list price, that's nice, but you only see this. So every time you add someone in here, if you've got 2 layers of distribution, you may be way down here. And this is where I am. My licensees manufacture the product, generally buy the raw materials, supply the labor, and sell it to the customer. So I'm down here, but I have very little costs up there.
But you have to know what they're doing out here.
Yeah.
So that even if you're playing back here, right, you know how much room you have to work. Because, everybody's got to buy it and add value to it and or mark it up, right? So you got to know where you are.
Well, and lots of times that's hard.
Yeah.
This can be installation. So
Yeah.
when you make a reseller agreement, there's a balance of, do I hire a salesperson, or do I go out and let somebody else do that and pay them for it? And how much risk are they assuming? There's a whole
Assuming the cost, who's got
thing.
the coverage, who's
Yep.
covering the geography you need to cover, all of that.
So this is in this is in that key partner part of the canvas here. So you really want to, again, key partners are almost, well, they're partners. That trust factor again, you got to have it. So don't enter. That Chinese joint venture was our second joint venture, and the first, maybe the third one, and we've been with them for 15 years since then. Okay, so we went through customers and competition. If you go back to the triangle, why I said it was key. Cost is the other one, and you got variable costs. These are things that vary with your volume, which is materials. A cake takes a certain amount of material and a certain amount of labor. But then there's fixed costs, which are independent sales volume, which are you can't really change with volume. So these are just 2 fundamental decisions or pieces of your costs. And then some of the things we can do with those is sales, that should be times volume, but price times volume. I know if I sell a cake, how much I hopefully get for it and what it costs me. So my gross margin would be what I sold it for minus my variable costs. And these are things that accountants will talk to you about, and they're indexed numbers, and we'll talk about what they're for later. It's based on if you've got product mixes and things, these get to be important. But these are before your final product, and then your sales is your variable and fixed costs, that's your profit. And in, I think retail markup is a number that they look at a lot. And the idea here is to index so that you can compare a big customer to a small customer, to product A and product B. So it's kind of universalizing it. And then you can take some of this and calculate a break-even point, which is, we talked about selling something below cost. I never encourage people to go below break-even unless you're just starting. And you've got enough cash that you know you'll get to break-even before you run out of cash. So that's the accounting part again. This is the part you may want help with, but it's still pretty important. And just to show you the example, and we talked about, we were going to show examples. Sales, you've got meals served, gross profit, overhead, which are fixed, it's variable cost, fixed cost, net profit. So this is how it would look in a business. Any question on that stuff? This is a little bit dry. But then what you can do is you can break down your different mixes, and maybe I want to do my promotions on non-alcoholic drinks because I have a much better profit situation there because I'm selling water to people, right, basically, and gas. But it lets you look at your different pieces of your business and then manage.
Macaroni and cheese because it makes people thirsty for beer.
Yeah.
Bingo. Me.
Yeah, well, that's how chips and snacks got going in bars, right?
That's why they sell
Peanuts.
Give salty stuff away in bars. Yeah. People thirsty.
So any questions on the general financial piece of it? But you want to get to where you've got a reasonable gross profit and a fair bottom line, ideally, at the end of the year. And then you want to analyze the pieces, and this may be customer A, B, and C, or product A, B, and C, and you need to be looking at them and saying, well, do I really, if I'm not making any money on something, is it something the customer wants, to go with my product? With my chemicals, I don't sell cleaners, I don't sell rust preventatives, I sell pretreatment chemicals. So that's why I go through somebody else, because they've got all that other stuff and sales guys selling it, and it's all interactive.
Yeah, you don't have essentially the total answer.
Yeah.
So
It's like me selling you a nail and you don't have anything to do with it. I mean,
now, some of you, how many of you into services? Okay, and I forget the name of that presentation that I saw, 6 weeks ago that we put on, but here's the point. If you're selling, for instance, your time, and your time is limited,
right.
you want to make sure that you're getting the max price. As a matter of fact, the CPA who was presenting said, look, you want to be out there quoting, you maybe only want to get maybe 1 out of every 4 quotes you make.
If you're lucky.
That's about a good norm because you run the numbers, you're making more totals. You cite an example of an $800,000 business. The fellow was grabbing all kinds of jobs, and he was clearing $40,000 a year. So she gets him to jack his price up. He's got a $600,000 business, but he's netting over $100,000. Because the numbers can work that way, so you want to be careful. Now, so that's if your time's limited. On the other hand, if you can build a gazillion of them,
Right.
and you see, again, we talked about the supply-demand curve. If you can stimulate enough interest in what you're selling, go for low price and run it up because you're eating up your overhead sufficiently. But again, you have to run the numbers to see.
Yeah, we'll talk about service towards the end of the presentation too. I've got one slide on that. And then break even is just a question back to what Joe was saying, your number of units sold versus your revenue and costs, and the way your costs cross over your revenue is your break even
It
volume.
looks terribly like Algebra 1. I'm sorry, folks.
Yeah, it's really just multiplication.
Teach your children well. They need to know Algebra 1 if they want to get in the business.
And if you have 10 products, you'll have 10 lines and they'll average into one like this. So you got your variable costs and your fixed cost. And you can see where this line just pulls up to here to create that. More math, but try and make it simple. You have a question?
No.
Okay. You were squinting at that. Math.
Wasn't it?
Charts. Okay, so that's cost, customers, and competition. I want somebody to have a question. We couldn't have talked that long. I'm out of breath. Joe's getting tired. Comment, is it BS? Does it seem solid? Solid? Okay. Yeah, I think there's a lot in there that's really worth it. And as I said, don't be afraid to ask for help, because there's a lot of us who have been through that. So pricing strategy, you've got all kinds of different things you can do. You can do penetration pricing, like he was saying, drop your price a lot in order to get volume. You
or
can
just get jump started in the business.
Yeah,
right,
or to get
temporarily.
build your volume.
I'm going to stay low all the time. Have a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Always have a reason to get in and have a time limit.
And lots of times people will sell the whole tamale right up front. And like I said, sometimes I prefer to skinny down the offer, sell a piece of it cheap, and then, as we said, add service or some enhancement to it. Oh, you want custom colors? Well, we can do that, and here's the price for that, which is a little more value
About the
based.
razor or the blade.
Right, yeah.
You know, have a low price razor, make it up on the blade, or.
So that was a question I had, because I know when we're trying, especially with service-oriented capabilities, right? You want to get people in the door, so you're
Right.
willing to, just give them a taste,
Mm-hmm.
at a lower cost. The problem is we find that you set the tone
Yeah.
for, you're immediately implying that this is all it's worth.
Yep.
Right, so if you try to come back and ask for more, for the exact same thing, that's really hard to do. So for those of us, for some people that are starting out, determining what your service is worth, right, that can vary by geographic location, right, because the coasts are willing to pay more for service than say the Midwest is, et cetera. So how do you get your foot in the door? Is it through that
Yeah.
pricing, where you're just giving them a small segment
Mhm.
of what they want, realizing that what they actually need is much bigger?
Yeah. I've got one radical answer for that, and we talked about it here, was I'd rather give it away than discount it. I will give you a freemium to get credibility. The other thing you do is you go out and you build your credibility in the area somehow. And that may be through something that you eat, but that you do something similar to what you're targeting. Problem is when you're bidding, and like I told you, I did do Sibbers, so you're bidding the spec.
Yep.
So it's very hard to thin it down unless you have something else that you got very low cost that you can add on to it and say, well, here's option A, and if you want to add that, now you get to your price point you want.
And I think it's also a challenge if you're a practitioner, and also doing the bidding, right? It's very easy to get, if you're a passionate practitioner, it's very easy to get caught up in a cycle of, I just want to do a really good job for them. And suddenly you're giving away
Stuff.
and you really have to keep in mind when you're doing that first intro,
Yes.
whatever, you're leaving them hungry for, oh, I need the full answer, but still demonstrating enough expertise to show that you have it.
Good point. Anybody who's selling service especially, but anything you're selling, don't let them nickel and dime you on the add-ons. I mean,
Well, something that I've seen with that is like a person that develops an iPhone app. You have an app that's you're either curing boredom, you're keeping track of things. You make a free app to where that's available for 5 million people that they download. To where that when you go to promote yourself further in business, you can say, well, yeah, we have interest. 5 million people have already downloaded.
eyeballs. Yeah,
Whether
exactly.
it's a free download or not.
Yeah, that's a good example.
They already, whether they used it even.
Yeah, right.
Or some of the things you got to beta, if you've got a product you want to beta test, for instance, and you don't need 5 million, but you need a few, you
Yeah.
need the recommendation. How do you get that? I got a client right now asking me that, and I'm like, tell me more about your business, because that's as complicated as price. How do you work that in? And
That's another value of mitigating risk through referrals is a good point, and especially in professional services. If you can get a couple of good referrals from people that somebody knows, that's gold, right?
You move yourself up to I have a secret sauce and I'm indispensable.
Yeah.
Not a nice to have, right?
Yep. So good. There's a variety of pricing things that you can do. Value pricing for small companies is particularly good. And I'm watching time. What we're going to do is we're going to be done with the slides in about 10 minutes. And then anybody who wants to work through the worksheet, we'll stay here and we'll work with you on that for your particular situation. But value is based on perceived value, and value is perceived. It's in the eye of the customer, not yours, so you need to validate that with the customer being close to them. What I like about value pricing is it's good for small businesses. You're not bidding a competitor. You're not just going against your cost. It is less price sensitive because if you can establish the value by understanding your customer, it's a fair value. And perceptions, like I said, you've got to understand your customer, and some customers may be risk averse, in which case guarantees may be worthwhile. Another one who isn't, a guarantee is not going to be worth anything. So value is in the eye of the beholder. It allows niche competition, so you can take a small market, which for small businesses are particularly attractive, and it can enhance the value.
Why do we have people being on the door?
It's almost
It
3
was,
o'clock.
it was over like 9 minutes ago.
Oh, okay.
We were?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was long, okay. Never mind, we won't be doing the worksheets. Okay, the other thing is competitor pricing.
Yeah, okay.
So we're 5 minutes out. Competitor pricing, and that is obviously, like we said, not desirable, but you get into it a lot. So there you want to still use all those tricks that we talked about in order to make it. Service businesses, there's different kinds of pricing that you can do. Sometimes the customer sets it up, sometimes not. You have to have a very defined product and scope of work so that there's no misunderstandings, and then you have to protect your intellectual property.
Actually does set the price because they're the big dog in the room, and okay. So, but then you've got
Yep.
to have a service or a cost advantage on them that lets you get your.
I just want you to be aware, and this is a real quick thing. Go ahead. Price elasticity is volume price. Obviously, you probably sell less at higher price, but there's curves, and you have to keep an eye. And when you're discounting things, you ought to track what your sales do, and that'll tell you about how that works. So also, finally, you need to have what your goals are. Do you want to grow? Do you want to be profitable? What is your strategy? And then this is the form. If you've got it there, again, if you want to work on it, you can contact me. I'll give you. We'll be at the table. Yeah, we'll be at the table in 2 minutes, and we can give you our cards, and then we can connect on that if you want to pursue that any further. Okay? Thank you.
Some other stuff